So for anyone who doesn't know, an Access course is a 9-month level 3 qualification taken by adults instead of A-levels. And there are all sorts of different subjects you can take. You can take Access to Science, Access to Nursing, and Access to Healthcare Professionals, and Access to Medicine. And the problem with Access courses is that it's very difficult to find the right colleges in the right places for the particular subjects you want to study, because obviously the goal of doing an Access course is eventually completing it and then moving on to university. This is definitely the case with Access to Medicine. Access to Medicine is a very uncommon course and it's very difficult to find. And unfortunately, this means people are left in the position of either having to commute or do online studying. Which brings me on to the second point, which is it is actually possible to do an Access course online. In today's video, I want to show you the pros and cons for both distance learning and in-person learning for Access courses. So we're going to start off with distance learning because obviously this is what people are probably going to be clicking this video for, and it's probably what they're most unfamiliar with, so I thought I'd start here. So starting with the pros, one of the first most attractive pros, at least for me, is the fact that you don't have a commute. So obviously when you learn online through an Access course, you don't have to worry about getting to college. Which means that, one, you can either get extra sleep if you're like me and you're a bit of a night owl, or two, it does leave you more time in the day to dedicate to studies. Because not everyone lives close to their college. Some people end up commuting, for multiple hours every single day there and back because they can't find a local college to them that will do the course that they need. And the next pro, of course, is that distance learning gives you a much more flexible schedule than you might find with in-person college-based learning. And this is down to the fact, at least from my research and what I've found out so far about Access to Medicine, is that they usually teach the content of the course online with either pre-recorded videos or study material that's actually on the learning portal. And this is great because that means you can study when you feel at your sharpest. You don't have to worry about waking up early in the morning and thinking, Christ, I've got to get to college, I've then got to concentrate for 6 hours straight or whatever it might be. You can work it around what suits you. If you tend to think clearer and better in the evenings or at night, you can do that. If you think clearer in the morning, you can also do that. But you can also split things up, because obviously if you're going to a college, you have to be there for the duration of the day in order to learn everything you need to learn. Whereas with a distance learning course, you can split that up across an entire day. You can do 2 hours in the morning and maybe another 2 hours in the evening. You can really split it up and fit other things around it. Which brings me to the next pro, which is of course the fact that there is a possibility, because of the more flexible hours, that you can fit in work. Now personally, everyone I've spoken to that has done an Access course so far has said that you shouldn't have a job while you're doing an Access course, just owing to the fact that the course is so intensive. There's a lot of things you need to catch up on, and if you ever get behind, it's very difficult to catch up as it is without having a job, sort of looming over you in the background as well. For some people, I have seen some people do Access courses and take on a job at the same time as well. It can work, and if you're one of those people, this is definitely quite an attractive pro of doing distance learning. And the final and most obvious pro for me with distance learning Access courses, especially with Access to Medicine, is the fact that you don't have to worry about the location of the course. Because obviously you're studying online, so you can go with pretty much any provider that is suitable and you will end up fine. Whereas obviously if you wanted to study Access to Medicine in an in-person college, then obviously you're limited to location, and how long you're willing to commute to do that. And now on to the cons. Now unfortunately, there are quite a few here, and I want to point out that just because these are here, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is a bad choice. It's all about weighing up the pros and cons of both and deciding which works best for you and what outweighs the pros and the cons on either side. So the first con for me, which is actually quite a big deal for me personally, is the fact that you won't have access to a lab. Now this is a problem because a lot of medical schools actually, if you do mention that you're doing an Access to Medicine distance learning course, the main concern that they bring up, at least from what I've seen so far with the universities that I've talked to, have mentioned concerns about lack of practical experience. Because obviously everything is done online, you won't have access to a real science lab. Medical schools seem to worry about that a fair amount, which is fair enough. They need to make sure that their applicants are fully prepared for the course, as it is a very intense and difficult course to do, and they want to make sure that their applicants have all the suitable skills in order to get through it. And that brings me on to my next con, which is the fact that medical schools are actually quite wary of distance learning courses. And to make it worse, they're already quite wary of Access courses anyway, without adding the distance learning element on top. At this current point in time, I only know of 3 medical schools that accept distance learning courses, or at least claim to on their websites. So obviously that cuts your options down quite a lot versus, the traditional route of in-person learning. So that is definitely something worth taking into account. If you do distance learning, you will ultimately end up with less options and therefore less chances of getting into medical school if things go wrong. So the next concern I want to bring up about distance learning courses is the fact that you don't have contact with other students on your Access course. This will depend very slightly on the provider of the course. Some providers online do have forums where their students can talk together and sort of, hook up with each other on the forum. But it's not quite the same as forming in real life connections where you can actually sort of, go to the library together and study things or ask each other questions in real life and kind of hold each other accountable a bit more, I think. So if you find it's very important for you to have a good peer support network of people who are going through the same thing as you, then perhaps a distance learning course isn't for you. So that brings me to the next concern, which is, of course, the cost. So in a traditional college, there's two ways to fund your course. So the first way is if you haven't actually done a level 3 course before, then the government actually pay for your course entirely. You don't have to worry about anything financial. The college just write it off. But if you have taken a level 3 qualification before, you will be eligible for a learner loan. And this is basically the same as what I mentioned before. It's just that you take out this learner loan, and upon completing the course, that loan will be written off by Student Finance England. So this is actually something that's a bit different when it comes to distance learning colleges. So very unfortunately, distance learning courses aren't able to provide learner loans. So that means you have to actually finance the course yourself, regardless of whether or not you've taken a level 3 qualification before or not. So this can be quite expensive because an Access to Medicine course can cost around £1,300, and it's definitely something worth considering because that's a lot of money. That being said, different providers will have the option to split up the sum into monthly installments across a 12-month period in order so that you can pay for it. So the first pro on my list here is, of course, the fact that a traditional in-person college is a tried and tested path. There is plenty of evidence of people that have done Access courses for medicine and have gotten a place at university to study medicine. Now, there is, of course, the same thing happening for distance learners as well, but because it's such a recent thing, it is kind of uncharted territory, so it's quite an unpredictable situation. So personally for me, I like to err on the side of caution, and I think here traditional colleges really have a big win over distance learning colleges, at least for now, in this department. Which brings me to my next pro, which is, of course, the fact that if you're doing the traditional college route, you're going to be in a class full of other people learning the same stuff as you. This is a very powerful thing because that means you can, friend up with people and study together. And this is actually quite an important thing because that means you can set up a support network around you of people who know what it's like going through what you're going through. You're all going on the same path and you can kind of inspire each other and keep each other motivated because of that. You're all going on the same journey. You're all struggling with similar or the same problems. And, I think that's actually quite a powerful tool to help you get through a very stressful period of your life. And building on that is the next pro, which is the fact that you will get to build a more personal relationship with your teachers. Because obviously doing a distance learning course, the interactions that you'll have with your teachers are going to be kind of fleeting and short, whereas obviously teachers on your Access course are going to get to know you a little bit better because you're actually going to be in class. That means you're going to be talking to them more, and they're going to have a little bit of a better idea of who you are as a character as well, which is great because they might be able to give you more tailored advice for things like studying or how to tackle certain problems on the course. So I think this is actually quite a significant pro when it comes to the learning experience of an Access course. And as I mentioned earlier, another pro to in-person colleges is the fact that funding is a lot easier because you have the option of learner loans, or if you haven't studied a level 3 course before, you get it just funded for free by the government. You don't have to worry about paying anything, which is quite a significant pro because you don't have to worry about signing up for a loan, you don't have to worry about getting any money together, you can just sign up for the course and go. So the last pro on my list here is, of course, the fact that you're going to have lessons. And having lessons for me is actually quite important because I treat lessons as a revision period. So what I usually end up doing is I actually revise for the material that I know is going to be covered in the next week. And by the time I actually get into class, they're going to be covering everything that I've already learnt from the book the week before, which gives me a chance to re-solidify everything that I've learnt and ask any questions that I want cleared up. And this is actually quite a significant thing because obviously if you're doing a distance learning course, that's all on you. You're having to organise that all by yourself, and obviously you do have the support of the teachers at the distance learning college, but it's not quite the same as a traditional in-person college, where you have a proper teacher who knows you, who you can talk to and email. So the first con on my list for traditional colleges is of course the fact that you have to commute. Now this isn't a problem for everyone because some people might live around the corner from a college that does access to medicine, in which case fantastic, you don't have to worry about it. But it's a problem for people like me who actually live quite far away from a college that provides access to medicine. The nearest college to me that does that is about an hour away, which actually isn't too bad. But for someone like me who's a little bit neurotic, and because I have to rely on public transport, it's not very reliable where I am, and I would really worry about being able to arrive on time consistently every single time I have to go up to college. So personally for me, I've been saving up over the last 6 months to move out and actually move to where the college is in order so that I can take the course and not have to worry about getting there and getting back every day that I have to go to college. So of course the downside of that is the expense. You know, one, you have to pay for all the transport to get to college if you're going to commute to college, and worse yet, two, if you're doing what I'm doing, you have to actually pay for the rent to actually live in the area where the college is that provides the course, which isn't going to be an option for everyone because obviously being an adult you may have some ties that are keeping you in a certain area which make that impossible. So that's definitely something to consider when you're considering the differences between a traditional college and an access course that's done through distance learning. And the next con here is of course the fact that it's not exactly very flexible. So usually a college will have 2 days, at least for access to medicine, in a week where you will go into college and study in lessons. These are done at fixed times in the day, and that's it. This can be quite limiting because if you have other commitments to attend to at the time, this could be quite difficult to stick to consistently. So summary then. There are pros and cons for both traditional colleges and distance learning colleges. And it's worth taking into account the pros and cons for both because obviously everyone's lifestyle and circumstances are different, especially mature students that are going into medicine. You know, we all come from different backgrounds with different commitments, and I think it's very important to consider those things when we're applying for either option. Sure, at this point in time, distance learning courses definitely aren't ideal, and they give you the least options when it comes to applying for university, but at the same time, it is an option. It's better than nothing, and it will provide you with a chance at the very least. At the same time, this is also a very important decision, and that's why it's very important to sort of heavily weigh up the pros and cons for both and see what will realistically suit you the best and what will actually empower you to get the highest possible grade on the course that you need in order to get into medical school. The final thing that we should all consider here is the fact that distance learning courses will improve over time. They will become more accepted by more universities as time goes on, and this is because there's a new subject descriptor which dictates how the course needs to be taught for both traditional and distance learning colleges, which will mean, in theory, more universities should be more accepting of distance learning courses in the future. So that's it for today. If you like the video, please give it a like, and if you'd like to see more of my content in the future relating to access to medicine, please subscribe, and I will see you soon.